It's time for another lap around the track with all the latest in motorsports interviews. Sometimes we get bent feelings, but we can't wait for the Bent Fender Podcast with your hosts, Nathan Conway and Wes Llewellyn.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Bent Fender Podcast. This is Nathan. No, it's not. It's Wes. Wes, insert nickname here, Llewellyn, co-host of the Bent Fender Podcast. You'll notice that Nathan is not here with me this week. He is on a well-deserved vacation to New Orleans with his family, and I have got control of the entire show all to myself. No, I'm just kidding. No, I am by myself, and what we've decided to do this week is kind of throw together a best of episode, so that way we can do kind of a primer of where we've been, what we've been doing, and give you a little clip from each episode to kind of bring you up to speed. So I have been working diligently for the past couple days, editing together this episode, listening to the shows that we have done, and picking stories that I feel are important, stories that I feel will give you a good idea of what we're doing with the show. When we first started out, and if you stood still long enough for Nathan or I to talk to you for any length of time, you've already heard this story, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you again. But when we first started out doing the podcast, our general idea of doing this was as promotion for Nathan's racing program. And while that was, a fantastic idea, and there's nothing wrong with that idea, we realized pretty quickly that that was the wrong reason for us to do this. So we did a couple interviews, and I think we made it up through Jake Schown, which was our third interview, and realized that our idea to do this as promotion for Nathan was the wrong thing to do. And what we really needed to do was start capturing an oral history of the sport and what's going on in racing today. And as we've been interviewing different drivers and as we've been learning more about these drivers, our whole focus has changed. So that way, what we're really trying to do now is get you inside the car with these guys and gals and let you know them. Because you may go to Windy Hollow every single week. You may go to KMS or Rockport or Cedar Ridge or Tri-State or, back when Chandler was open. You may go out there every single week and see these drivers or see these cars. And unless they're winning, you don't get the opportunity to hear their story. So that's what we want to do. We want to let you know who the driver is, who's behind that wheel, and let you know about their history and where they've come from, and just give you a better understanding of the people and the characters that make this sport so great. So, that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we want to continue to do with this, is bring you those stories and let you get to know these people so that way this sport can continue to grow and be as great as we can make it. So we've got, I think, 8 clips or 8 sets of clips from the first 8 interviews that we've done. And it kind of turned into something where I was listening to the episodes and I was starting to hear similar stories being echoed from driver to driver. And what I've done is kind of compiled this in a way that you get to hear these same similar kind of stories. So you get to hear what's going on in their lives, and you get to hear what makes this sport important for them. So I hope that you enjoy what we're doing. I hope you enjoy this episode. And I know that it's no substitute for getting another driver in the seat with us and getting an interview. But sometimes vacations happen and vacations need to happen. So, can't fault Nathan for that. And, we've got a lot of great stuff going on with us. Last episode we did was a complete and total, full episode out in the field with the new equipment that we've purchased, and we got to hang out with the monster truck guys and gals and get some fantastic stories from them. And we started building inroads with those guys, so hopefully we can help bring monster trucks back to Davis County, because that's where they should be. And it was a great time. It was my first time at a monster truck show, so hopefully that comes across and you can hear how excited I was about the whole event, and you can hear how fantastic the stories were. So we have amazing things lined up for you in the future, and I know we talk about that just about every week, but it's true. And once we have details lined out and we can start talking about these things to everyone, y'all will be the first to hear it. So stick with us, listen to what we've got coming, and it's going to be great. So I'm going to get ready to throw it to the first interview segment. But as always, we need to talk about who makes this happen for us. And our podcast sponsors are High Octane Wraps and Apparel, Willie's Carbon Dyno Shop, and Lori Kimball Home Realty Incorporated. So without them, we couldn't do this. We also have to thank our other sponsors, and those would be Mach 5 Race Cars Parts and Carts. We have Chad's Barbershop. We have Glenstone Construction. We have Martin's Towing and Recovery. We have Fairview IT Management, Slingshot Media Group, and Red Star Graphics. So without those guys, we wouldn't be where we're at. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are consumable. All you have to do is go to your favorite podcast site, search for Bent Fenders or the Bent Fender Podcast, and you can find the podcast. You can go to the website, www.thebentfenderpodcast.com. You can go to the Conway Racing Team website, which is conwayracingteam.com. You can go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere that you consume media, you can find the podcast, because we wanted to make it that easy for you guys. So it's a cool thing, and we love hearing feedback. We love hearing what you guys like. We like hearing what you don't like. Please keep telling us. Keep telling your friends. We want to see these numbers, get up there as far as followers and everything, and we want you to like and share all of our content. And we want you to hopefully learn more about these drivers, and if you don't have a favorite driver, maybe we can help you pick one. So without any further ado, we're going to throw it to the first commercial break, and on the other side of the commercial break, we have our very first guest ever, Blake Smith, and he's going to come in, and he's going to talk about the state of racing and what's going on. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because these episodes have been recorded. I think we recorded Blake back in March. So listen to what he says and compare it to what you see happening today, and see if there are any similarities or if there are any differences. So on the other side, we have Blake Smith, and we'll be right back.
Breakdowns, collisions, lockouts. Things can happen on the road at any time. That's why you should call Martin's Towing and Recovery. We have years of experience to help you in your time of need. Within minutes, we can provide you towing services, jump starts, gas refills, and even unlock services to get you back on the road. We are proud to be able to provide honest, dependable service that our customers have come to trust. Please give us a call 24 hours a day at 270-929-0718 for all your automotive emergency needs.
The time has come, buddy. I told you it was coming. So I want to transition to the state of local racing. You've been to many tracks, the dirt tracks, asphalt tracks, whether it be Kentucky Motor Speedway or some of our other racing facilities. The state of racing, buddy. What do you think the state of racing is? I said earlier in the last show, my take on it is it's struggling. Struggling to a standpoint of, we just talked about that a little bit, of declining attendance, and fans, drivers, the cars that are around here, different stuff. But what do you feel?
You use the word struggling. I don't know if I'd use the word struggling. I mean, it's not near as strong as it was 10 years ago. Let's be honest with that. Back in the day, you had the Motorsports Festival every year. You had 3 radio shows. it was just such a hotbed. I mean, you had the Speed Museum just opening up, and we can get to that in a minute as well.
Oh yeah,
but I really don't know. I think it really has a lot to do with some of your old school drivers. Just they've reached that point in their career where they're not driving; they're owners.
right.
Or they're track promoters. You look at the Westerfields; they were such big racers. Now they're track promoters.
Exactly.
James Weststein over at Rockport Raceway raced dirt all of his career, and he promoted that track along with his son Eric. I just don't know. I don't think it's struggling. We just are going to have to find a way to bring racing to the up and coming generation for them to get as involved as we once were.
Right. But and what I want to touch on is, and I know that you're not a driver yourself, but I don't know if you've got a chance to like look at some of the websites, check out their rules, check out their different stuff. We touched on the Westerfields and how they've transitioned into being track promoters, but is it one of those things is, they've got a system now that they've been doing for the last couple of years to where they only run a certain X number of races, kind of like Tri-State Speedway does. They run two nights and then they'll take 3 weeks off. They'll come back, run 3 weeks and take 2 weeks off, something like that. It's just a different schedule. It's not racing every Friday night. They've gone to Friday nights this year, but it's not racing every Friday night from the 1st of April to all the way to almost November. Jam-packed every single Friday night. They're going to be at Windy Hollow. They know that for the next 4 or 5 months. Is it one of those things where that differs from Cedar Ridge to where they run every Saturday night? Do you have more opportunity to have big shows? Do you think we don't have enough big shows? Do we kill everybody with the big shows? I mean, we're just forcing it down people's throat. I mean, what do you feel about that aspect?
I talked with Jimmy last year, and like you said, they were kind of doing the part-time schedule, hitting the big events, making it a big bang when they were at the racetrack rather than running it every week. I believe they were headed in the right direction last year until Mother Nature really took a toll on that and made them race 2 to 3 weeks back to back to back when they didn't have that time to really put it into it.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword. Tri-State Speedway obviously makes it work.
Oh yeah.
It's always packed. I wish I could tell you what their secret is, but they have one up there. It's just jam-packed every time they're there. I don't know if it's because they bring in the big shows, these big touring divisions.
Yeah. I'm sure Tommy Helfrich going to keep that close to the vest.
Exactly.
But okay. We'll transition into then cost. We touched on last segment of that. Cost of tickets, which it's fairly affordable to go to the racetrack. I remember when it was $20. It was $20 to get in the pits. Car and driver. It's now $30 at a lot of tracks. Some tracks are $40. I know for the Tuckasee Tollable Classic, it was $40 to get into the pits. But on a standpoint of when gas got over $3 and $4 a gallon, that hurt people. You don't have enough expendable income. You daggum sure can't throw it in on a race car.
Exactly. Although some try.
I've seen it happen. I've seen them. A personal story. I've seen guys that pulled the motor out of their vehicle that they drove or that they pulled their race car with, and put it in their race car just to race. Maybe not what I would have done, but teaches their own. But again, it cost. When the steel got up, the prices of steel, it's harder to build roll cages. Oil costs more. Tires cost more. Tires are through the roof. I don't know, racing tires especially. But even the DOT tires, we used to buy those things for, $50 a tire. Could get a whole set, for $100. But now, those tires are $125 a tire, and a racing tire, that's why a lot of them have gone to the Hoosier tires, are less than that now. They're still over $100 a tire, but still yet, So I don't know if you feel cost is one of those things where that's holding it down too, or...
I think you have to look at, the money you put in. Do you want to put enough money in, the tires and the oil to run every week? Or do you want to wait and run those big shows, maybe at Windy Hollow Speedway, Tri-State Speedway, some of your ones that only run the big ones? But then, is that risk worth the rewards you get? Because you're not getting, payback money every week because you're not racing every week.
Right.
But you're not paying an entry fee every week.
That's true.
I believe that the opportunity's out there. I mean, if you want to run the limited schedule at Windy Hollow, or if you want to go out and run every Saturday night down in Morgantown at Cedar Ridge.
Right.
I believe cost has played a major impact on it.
Right.
It's just really, you mentioned it's not that expensive to get to movies or to the races. It's the same price as
some people
to the
would
movies.
almost rather go to the movies
Well,
these days.
and
maybe
that's the thing about it. We've talked about a lot of your youth and younger people would rather pay that $10 to go spend an hour and a half at Malco in a dark room watching a movie than spending a whole Friday or Saturday night at the racetrack.
Right.
Where, I'd rather spend my time at the racetrack than the movies, but a lot of your younger people coming up, I think they'd rather go to the movies than go to the racetrack. I think you're just seeing a swing in just the age range right now is really making a difference. And like you said, cost as well.
Well, and that's where we need to get, and that's where, a lot of the point of this podcast, a lot of it is obviously get people's name out there, and we say this, I've said this on more than one occasion, but we need to be a friend of the racing community. We need to be a champion for the racing community. One of those things is, we don't know where the disconnect is. We don't know what the reason why, and I hate to pick on them, but Kentucky Motor Speedway. You look at the glory that they've had in the past. I think you could probably mark their history. There's two parts of their history. One, when it was a quarter-mile track. The next, when it's a 3/8 mile track. And you look at the way it is now. Like I said, raced there myself. Watched all kinds of races there. Great races. You remember, I don't know if you remember, they used to do the Night of NASCAR Stars. Mm-hmm. A lot of Harry Gant's been there, and Kerry Earnhardt came, and DW and Michael and the Greens, and but what has drove people away? That's what I don't know, I guess, and not that I run in the circle with Brad Payne too much, but love to ask him. Gonna try to reach out to him. Love to ask him what's going on with them, just in their whole season. But looking at that again, why don't people come? Why don't people come to the races? Why don't cars come to the races? Are we not paying enough money? That's what we're trying to get to. But we want to try to get it out in the open. I mean, if people don't think there's a problem, I don't know what you're paying attention to, because I love it. I love to get my car out there. I love to bring my car, support it. But, again, that's one of those things where, I love going to the races. You love going to the races. I think my wife would be more served to be like, okay, we went to the races last weekend. Let's do something else this weekend.
Right.
If I'm not racing, if I didn't have a car, hey, why don't we go do this or that, or go on travel somewhere, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe we're doing too much. Maybe we're not doing enough. So, like I said, that's one of those things, and that's a great take on it. And I'm glad that you don't think it's struggling, because maybe you're seeing something from another side of it, being, on the announcer side, the interviewer side, on your portion of what you do, than I see on a driver's side. I don't know. I know those are two differing points of view, but I'm glad that you think and you enjoy it.
And I think, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, no tracks. If we could all the tracks work together, and I know that a couple of them are with their rules. They're comparing rule books this year, and I believe that's going to help both of them greatly.
I think it will.
Just everybody get on the same page. I mean, I know we got racing Friday night in the community, Saturday night in the community, and Sunday night in the community when KMS races with Brad and his crew.
Right.
You got dirt track. I really wish we could get Windy Hollow Dragway back up and running. Yeah. I know there's been some rumors about that.
There, but...
you got Rockport Raceway on Saturday night. Go up there and get your go-kart. If I could get this promoted, and this is just a thought I had, I would love to have, like you mentioned, NASCAR night, bring in call it the Triple Crown. Mm-hmm. Friday night you run Windy Hollow. Saturday night you run the Rockport Raceway. And Sunday night you run KMS, bring in some of the local NASCAR stars, the Waltrips, the Greens, bring in Jeremy Mayfield, let them race, and kind of bring it back home. That may bring a crowd and get more people interested.
Right.
Although, those are some old school drivers. I mean, they're not the big names in the sport now, but maybe it could bring people back to the track and see what's going on.
Well, and they used to do that, like I said, we mentioned earlier, the night of NASCAR stars, and they would get into the local competitors. They would say, hey, drive my car. Harry Gant's in, Harry Best's car, or whatever. You want to throw it back to some of the old asphalt guys. Even, Bird Dog Barry Snyder tearing it up there. John Hayden and the Pedleys and, some of those guys. But one thing I want to lead into is, you're talking about you'd love to see that Triple Crown, or you've got some ideas for some things. But what are some things that you'd love to see going forward? Are there any specialty races, any specific classes that we need to create, delete, that don't normally run in our area? Or, you see some tracks that have the motorsports mayhem, and they got the trailer races and the buses and jumps and this and that, stuff like that. Is there stuff in particular that you've seen or that you've got in your head to say, if I was a track promoter, this is what I would do, or, something like that?
I think, and this goes back, again, this is the thoughts of Blake Smith, not Regional Motorsports Power Hour.
Oh, yeah.
But if we could bring in some of the local government and get them on board, let's get the Motorsports Festival back going. Let's get some of those back on board. Let's have your county and, your city commissioners out here racing at KMS in a limo race at the, 8 or the round track or the figure 8. And, just get them back involved in the community. Bring out some, your local radio personalities. Bring in, just bring other people not familiar with racing into the racing circle and expand that circle.
Well, you think of that as something they don't even do that anymore. They used to do it at Irwindale when they bring in movie stars and singers and you'd have NASCAR guys and drag racers and motocross guys and superbike and this and that, and they put them all out there in one one type of car. Mm-hmm. But that would be good. I like your idea there, especially getting some of the local government. I mean, if they would do it, your city commissioners or your county commissioners, or your fiscal court guys, but having prepared cars and again
equal,
right? Cost standpoint, we'd have to try to get them all. X amount of, we get 4 Dodge Neons or what, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be mini stocks. It could be big cars, but, you get what I'm saying is something that kind of like the IROC series did, but we could make it in a controlled environment. They're going to do 5 laps and this and that and the other. So, but I like where you're going with that. Are there anything else like big series that like these guys need to try to go after, or?
I believe like they bring the CR racing up here, CRA racing to Whitesville. I believe that's a good turnout.
Yeah.
I believe we're headed in the right direction. I believe we're bringing the entertainment to the tracks. If we could just find a way to get the fans to come to the track. I mean, Nathan, let's be honest. Barbecue Festival doesn't even have a race car show anymore.
No, they don't, and that's sad. And again, I remember the Motorsports Festival that all the tracks would kind of link up, well, mainly when
work together for that whole week,
right? And try to be like, they're going to have Monday night was the radio show, and they're going to have a car show, and then Tuesday night was somewhere else, and we're going to do this, that, and the other. And then it culminated with big races on the weekends to say, the Windy Hall Dragway had a big show, and then you would have Windy Hall would have their big show on Sunday night, and KMS would have a show. And so, like I said, I think it's sad. I mean, I don't know how we could let it go.
The Kentucky Motorsports Hall of Fame and Speed Zim is sitting down there collecting dust as we speak.
Right. And I know that you've done some work with that and covered some of those things, with those ceremonies, and they try to induct, X amount of guys every year, or ladies, excuse me. But, but then again, do we hear a whole lot about it? I mean, do we hear about it beforehand, or do we hear about it say, oh, these people were inducted in the Motorsports Hall of Fame this weekend?
there was, besides me, there was one other media outlet down there that day for the last induction back in 2017. Let's go back. You mentioned I'm an Elliott fan.
Right.
The Georgia Racing Hall of Fame in Dawsonville is absolutely state-of-the-art, awesome. And not just because it incorporates so much of the Elliott, but it really includes a lot. I mean, that's essentially where NASCAR got its start at, is, running moonshine.
Right.
It's I wish I could bounce ideas off of them to help make, our Hall of Fame and our Speed Museum what it is. I mean, you had the simulator down there for a while. It's just sitting there as a white car with a few decals on it collecting dust. The Mark Martin car that was down there, it's left. And there's some other stuff down there.
Right.
But it really comes back to just getting everybody on board. Race fans know what race fans like.
Oh, exactly.
We need to get people who don't follow racing maybe as closely involved and bring them into the sport, and then I believe that would really help expand it.
Well, and I'm gonna tell on myself here. I haven't been down there in a long time, and shame on me for that. And I will admit it wholeheartedly. And I guess people, we can blame it on getting busy or working or this and that and the other. I've got my own racing program I've got to deal with, but again, that's something in our local area. That Kentucky, and Owensboro in particular, was a hotbed of racing. I mean, the sign out there at Kentucky Motor Speedway hung there forever. Where stars were born.
Stars are born.
And that's one of those things where maybe we need to cultivate those stars again. And some of these guys, we need to get some eyes looking, some big eyes from outside of our area to pull these guys up that way.
I mean, we're in the middle of March Madness now. Coach Cal was just in Henderson.
Right.
Last week, had his eye on a couple of Henderson basketball players for the UK game. Let's bring in some of these back. Jack Roush used to have the Gong Show where he had some of his, some of the drivers compete for a spot on his team. It seems like now talent doesn't mean near as much as having your family sponsor you. Yeah. If your family owns a fleet of gas stations, your family owns, another company, they're going to go on that race car, and you're finished 38th every week. Well, your daddy paid for it.
Yeah, and that's sad, and I know that trickles around to some of our racing, and you don't want to, and of course you don't want to call anybody out on that. I mean, hey, they got there however they got there. They're another competitor, and whether they and some of these guys do have the talent to back it up, and that's great, and you don't get better until you're racing the best. So that's one of those things where, maybe my stuff, and it's a great feeling. I'm going to tell you, it's a great feeling to outrun guys that may be a little more well-funded. Maybe they have a bad night, but you outran them with what you have in your car, and that you don't have that level.
Exactly.
So one quick thing before we start rolling to the end there, in your field, in broadcasting now for sure, and also is pseudo media personality, what advice do you have? What would you give, some of these, we talk about the young people and turning them to our racing programs or our tracks and things like that, but what would you give, from your chair?
For someone wanting to come in and just watch the sport and, just put the technology down, put down that tablet, put down that phone, go to your local racetrack and see what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to get involved in motorsports media, make contacts. I mean, that's what I've done. I've been fortunate enough to make the contacts that I have, and have landed me where I'm at. I mean, I'm nowhere near the top. I just enjoy what I do.
Well, and that's a lot of it's being humble and not forgetting where you came from, and being just a regular guy. Because like I said, the point of this show, the point of you having you come on here was to get Blake Smith, the fan, the man, out there. That
put a different headset on,
right? But you don't get to express that, and being working for a radio station, you kind of got to go with their views, what they deem that you need to put out there. But and of course we don't know the ins and outs of that, but that's one of those things where people's got to put the phones down. People's got to put the technology down. and I said it on a previous episode. We've only had one, so I call it the previous episode, I guess. But is that you don't hear, like, the stories that you hear, the people that you meet at your local racetrack, for better or for worse, it takes all kinds. I will say that. It just takes all kinds. We'll leave it at that. But you don't get that anywhere else. I'm a firm believer of that, and you
look up and you see who's around you. You know, put faces with names, meet people,
right?
Network outside of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Make those contacts,
right?
And I believe that's really going to help us put us in the right direction.
Yeah.
Even from the first episode, you hear how important it is for those bonds and that camaraderie that is so easily built in the pits at the racetrack, or even from a fan standpoint. You start to learn about these drivers and make those connections, so that way when you're watching a race, it kind of means more. And I know it does for me. It means a whole lot more for me when I sit in the stands and I know who's behind the wheel of those cars. I've told the story before about how Nathan and his wife Sarah and I went to Florence on Saturday night, and we went to Hobstadt on Sunday night, but on Friday we went to Windy Hollow, and I just had a much better time watching the cars go around the track at Windy Hollow because I knew the drivers and I knew their stories and I had somebody to root for. So while the World of Outlaws, the wing sprints were fantastic to watch and it was a great show, and the late models at Florence, it was a fantastic show to watch, I just had a much more personal connection with those drivers and it felt better. So from the very beginning, we're starting to see, even from Blake's perspective, how important those things are and how important it is to network and become part of this. And in order to make sure that this sport thrives and stays alive, we have to do those things. So coming up next, we've got a couple clips from Blaze Melton's episode. He was our first driver episode, the first race car driver that I met aside from Nathan. And we had a great time with Blaze, and we got to go to Clarksville and work in his pit and help him at a race, and I got to experience that for the first time. And I feel like the friendship that we formed was really cool, and it was the first time that I got my hands dirty, I guess, with someone in a pit. And I didn't do much work. I carried some tires. But I think it's important to get out there, and if this is something you're passionate about, to try those things. So we're going to roll into some clips with Blaze. And this is Nathan and Blaze just talking about, again, advice to give to drivers and state of racing and those things. So here's Blaze and Nathan.
Well, I want to ask you, I've been to the races with you, a bunch of times, and and we've all got, especially drivers, we've got all our little quirks, and it's different things that people might not know, or it's not necessarily secrets or anything like that. Yeah. But guys, we're a superstitious bunch. But your race day rituals, like what do you like on a typical race day? Not you don't have to go through the whole thing, but just some of the stuff like. Is there anything special you do? Like you got to do it before you go. It's bar none. It's got to be done.
Well, I never eat on race day before I leave the house. Mm-hmm. Typically, on the way to the racetrack, I may stop and grab something to eat. But on race day, I don't get hungry at all. Yeah. Most of the time I got to force myself to eat. Well, not for food though. Yeah, yeah. You're hungry, but not for food. I'm hungry for a win. I'm not hungry for food, and it's not from butterflies. It's not from getting nervous or anything of that nature. It's just on race day, I'm focused, and the last thing that I think about is food, and is wanting to eat. Not saying that that's a ritual, but I can tell you every day, whenever you see me at a racetrack, I could care less about going and getting a cheeseburger.
Well, yeah, that's true. And, I've done that myself. You get so in the zone because, a lot of people, even though you've got all week to work on your race car, and you do, a lot of people don't understand how much work it actually is getting ready to go from the time you get out of bed
Yeah.
till you get that race car on the trailer, get the trailer loaded up, the truck, and all this stuff. There's a lot to it. And,
Oh yeah, there's several hours of preparation before you even roll out of that driveway, to go to the racetrack. No matter if I'm running 45 minutes up the road to run at Windy Hollow or if I'm running 4 hours up the road to run in Illinois somewhere, the preparation on race days is just a lot. And another thing is, I don't drink any kind of Cokes on race day. It's either water or Gatorade or some sort of energy drink. There's no Cokes or anything.
Well, you don't want to bog yourself down. You want to stay hydrated, and that way you're thinking clearly. You feel good.
Exactly. So. But as far as having any lucky underwear, I don't have any lucky underwear on race day. I don't have any lucky socks. I don't have anything.
I had to pause for that for just a minute. Did you notice what Blaze talked about? Preparation. We're going to hear that a lot more echoed through these other clips because that is the most important thing that we've learned so far from these drivers that we've talked to. How to win races might not necessarily be the car you're driving, might not necessarily be the horsepower in the car. Those things absolutely are important and they damn sure help. But the number one thing that we've learned is preparation. That's what wins races.
So, and their rituals is different for everybody, and I know everybody's got them. They've got to have them, but...
some people, they don't like green on their race cars. Some people don't eat peanuts,
Well, I've said that for years.
Yeah.
Well, it might not be all preparation that wins races. There may be some superstition that helps get that car across the finish line at the end, so... This is the first time I think we've heard Nathan talk about how green on a race car is not for him. So, that's where this started. Now we're going to jump over into one of my favorite sections or segments of the interviews, and that's advice for drivers, and especially advice for younger drivers. So, Blaze again was our first driver. So here is his take on what he feels is important for those young drivers.
We got a lot of hopefully young listeners out there, and we've got a lot of people, especially when you go to the track on the weekends. And this is something I say that I've said in several episodes now. But we've got look at the stands. Look at the stands at a racetrack on any given race night, and you look at the diversity of people we have out there, and especially kids are there, and kids are impressionable.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where we want to present the best us we can, and we want to make those people fans if we can. And, and obviously we want them to be fans of everyone.
Yeah.
And if they don't like us as their favorite driver, that's okay, as long as they've got a favorite driver.
Exactly.
But I think that it's important to be a role model a little bit. And, a lot of what happens in the pits, gets heated at times, and you've had your run-ins, and I've had my run-ins and different stuff, and it's just a part of stock car racing.
It is.
That is one thing that follows that. But, those fans are impressionable, those kids and younger adults. And what I want to ask you is your advice, I guess, to some of these people who, may want to start out in racing, may want to get involved, start being a pit crew person, and bring them in, different things like that. I mean, what's your advice?
Well, I come in, like I said previously, whenever I come into racing, I was never involved on a pit crew or anything like that. I knew that that's what I'd want to do, was race a car. But I guess, what I would tell somebody that was interested in coming into stock car racing is, if you can, become a wrench hand, turn some wrenches on somebody's car, and make sure that this is what you want to invest your money in. Stock car racing is a very expensive sport.
It is.
And that goes even to the point of it don't matter if you're in a street stock bomber style car or a modified. It costs the same amount to get to the racetrack. There may be a price range difference in between the cars, as far as the fuel that you got to put in them. But I mean, it costs us the same to get there,
Right.
And it takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of money. So I would advise somebody that was interested in coming into stock car racing is to turn some wrenches with somebody first, and make sure this is where you want to invest your money at. And I hope that this is where you want to invest your money at, because, I'm always tickled to see new people coming into the stock car racing, whether it be in the modifieds, whether it be in the mini stock. As long as they're out there having fun, that's the main thing.
And there you have another concept that we find being brought up time and time again by drivers. You have to get out there and have fun doing this. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If it feels like work, then it probably is, and you need to maybe reevaluate what's going on with your racing program or, as a fan. So we can't thank Blaze enough for his experience and his advice that he brought to the show. We can't thank him enough for what he's done for us as a friend and as a driver in this community. We can't wait to have him back on the show for another interview to catch up with him to see what's going on. So we're going to throw it to a commercial real quick, and when we come back on the other side, we have none other than the Hartford hitman himself, Jimmy Westerfield.
Let's face it, we love racing. We need to keep those race machines in tip-top shape to stay competitive. That's why we rely on Mark V race cars and parts located at 2035 West 2nd Street in Owensboro, Kentucky. They specialize in stock cars, but you'll find all the parts you need for your racing, go-karts as well. They are your go-to experts for parts, wheels, tires, fuel, and a wide variety of other items to keep you on the track. They have hundreds of parts in stock and can special order thousands of others. Give John Hayden a call at 270-240-5587.
And we're back with Jimmy Westerfield. I want to go into something now, Jimmy, and I know a lot of racers have this, and I know I personally have got a few myself. Race day rituals, getting ready to go to the track, and even now, with your promoter hat on, may enter into this as well. But what are some of the things that you just had to do before you went to the racetrack?
You first. I want to hear yours first.
Well, I'm very meticulous about some of the stuff that I do, and I've got to make sure different stuff is ready. But I like doing it all myself, and even down to, wear the same pair of boxers every week. They're clean, by the way. Don't think they're not. We wash them, by golly. But no, they wear the same pair of boxers, or I've got to wear the same pair of shorts to the racetrack, or I used to wear the same hat all the time, and different stuff. But just going over the car and different things, I have to do certain things myself. I have to put stuff together the right way, and I have to, I do certain wheels before the other one, and I don't know, it's a little quirky that way, but that's some of the stuff that I like doing.
My stuff, like when either me or my daughter, either one was racing, preparation is the key to winning, and I always had a certain place that I wanted to be in my preparation before we'd leave to go to the track. And everybody knows that I never get there early. Back, when we were racing a lot, it wasn't, it wasn't uncommon to stop, like if we were racing at Nebo, to stop at the four-way stop there in Madisonville and start the car up, because we were trying to make qualifying. So because we were running alcohol and the car needed to be warm to be able to qualify, so I'd let it idle all the way till we got to the racetrack. Well, it was always pretty funny whenever we'd come in and, whoever was checking us in or whatever would be like, do you know your car's running? But preparation, that was just always my thing. I didn't have a thing where I wanted to wear, I don't know. I did have one shirt that I said was my lucky shirt, and it wasn't because I tried to wear it every time. It was, I think it was an AC/DC shirt, and I just noticed that I drove for Kevin Burt one year, and I noticed in like 3 or 4 of the pictures that I won that I had that stupid shirt on. But, other than that, we didn't really have anything. We just try to be prepared as much as we could. And, anybody that knows a race car, you can work on them as much as you want and still feel like maybe there's something else I could do.
It's almost kind of like these guys are reading from the same script as far as what it takes to to have a great car and have a great program? Preparation. You know, it's again, you're gonna hear that echoed throughout this entire best of episode. So just sit back and get ready to hear it some more, because it is important, and it does show on these drivers who take the time to prepare and to get their program ready. And you know, you'll hear it when we get to Josh Harris. You know, he echoes the exact same thing. So didn't want to stick with all kind of stories about preparation and things like that. You know, I wanted to throw in a cool story or two. And here's one from Jimmy where he talks about doing a little tumble on the track. So coming back with Nathan and Jimmy talking about that.
Well, and you talk about had a fast car and some of the things different things that happened. I remember one night at Windy Hollow, you driving in a Cruiser Series and ended up on your top and everything else over off of turn 1 and 2 at Windy Hollow, and had a car could win that race, no question. And just things that happen though, things get caught up.
I'll take you through my last 3 laps of that race. So Dwayne Richardson and Bill Mormon are sitting here battling. And I really don't know if them two never liked each other or what, but I know they beat on each other a lot. So I keep this in my mind. Well, I'm driving David Dowell's car.
Right.
Well, this engine in this car never ran right. I won with it quite a bit, but it never ran right from day one. But when the track would slick off, I could pretty much roll to the high side and just hold it on the floor and just make laps.
Right.
You know, it was about that easy. So anyhow, Dwayne and Bill gets beating on each other, and I'm sitting here holding this thing on the floor, and they could ease away from me a little bit each lap. And they went into turn 3, got together a little bit. I rolled up on them pretty good, but I done made up my mind that if whatever they done, I wasn't going to let off the gas, and I was going to try not to really wreck nobody, but I was going to try to go by.
He's committed.
So they get together coming off 4. Dwayne, he hits the wall, just kind of glances off of it, but it slowed him down a lot. Bill goes toward the infield, and I just went right through the middle. Well, when Dwayne come off of the wall, I hit him with my right side, and it kind of knocked me down the track. Dwayne's car was really, it was fast. Anyhow, I come out with the lead in this deal. So I go down the back stretch and get almost turn 3, and I feel Dwayne hit me in the back end. And he pretty much pushed me the rest of the way around there. That's how much faster. But I didn't think he'd wreck me, and I thought, he's going to push me to the finish line because I'm going to make this thing as wide as I can make it.
As big as a track.
So we go into turn 1 like that, and he's pushing me, and this thing breaks the right rear axle, and the tire got up under the car, and it kicked it up in the air, and the front bumper dug in the ground, and probably one of the craziest rides I've ever took. I mean, here I am in a cruiser car, and I've drove a little bit of everything over the years, but man, that I don't know how many times it flipped. That was entering 1, and I stopped off the back stretch, well off of turn 2 over there.
That's right.
I was really happy that I was in a good seat and a good roll cage, because that could have been a pretty bad deal, but just one of them deals.
Well, it is, and that's the thing is you never thought, but you had a plan, and you stuck to it, and it just didn't pan out.
No.
Mechanical problems happen, and that's,
we go to Eldora, a little bit after that. That was close to the end of the season, and I drive Darren and Michelle Jones's. They own Reaper race cars. I drove their house car up there. We were just a little bit off on time, and when you get off on time up there, if you're not in the top, say 20% in qualifying, you get marred back, and there's a certain point where you ride around right against the cushion. It's really hard to pass.
Right.
And it's kind of like you get into that part where a lot of people are struggling. We was running the 3-night deal up there. I think the first night we rained out. Second night, I don't know, I'm running like 5th or 6th or something, and guy hit the wall, and I cut down to try to miss him, and he come across the track, and I hit him pretty much in the left rear wheel, knocked the front clip over on the car, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So ended our night. So we put it back together, got the truck and the telephone pole and the chains and all that, trying to pull everything back around. Put it back together, get it up there next night. Same thing happens. And the deal is up there when you're running, 110, 115 mile an hour entering the corner, when something stupid happens, you missing it is very slim to none. It's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to get stuck right in the middle of it. Yeah. Well, same guy done the same thing. He come across, and that time I hit him in the driver's door, and it junked the car that I was driving. And that was the last time I've drove a race car. It wasn't that. So that was the last 3 times that I drove. I crashed pretty hard. Wasn't that any of them scared me or hurt me or nothing like that, but I don't know if anybody wants to let me drive their stuff anymore.
Oh, now.
I don't know. I don't think that's it, but I've been offered a few rides, but
I really don't know anybody that wouldn't want Jimmy Westerfield to drive for them. So whether he's driving for somebody else or building his own car or what have you, I don't think we've seen the last of him. And if he wants to get out there, there's plenty of space on those tracks for him, and I can't wait to see him behind the wheel. So thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everything you do at Windy Hollow every week that you're running. Thanks for having us out and showing us hospitality. We couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you for everything. Up next, we're going to sit down with Jake Shown, and we don't always talk about super race-heavy things. We do sometimes end up talking about things that are a little more important, and that's family, and that's those ties that bind, and the things that we do on and off the track that make us all part of this thing together. And sometimes, as a family hurts, we all hurt. So Jake was humble enough and felt comfortable enough to share a story about Clay Davis and Ryan Peters. So we're gonna listen to that for a bit, and we'll come back and talk about that just a little bit more. So here's Nathan and Jake.
Clay Fuzzy Davis set out a season and let me drive a race car for him. And that's why we did that, I don't know. He just must have felt sorry for me, but we had a heck of a time, and that's just memories that I'll never forget. And I always said I wanted to win a couple features at Windy Hollow Speedway and never did. But getting to drive for Clay is probably my the top of the list there on the driving stuff, man. And I feel that at least when they knew we were there, and I'm okay with that. I don't feel like I need to prove anything else to anybody. I kind of proved it to myself. And
well, and I know you guys were, and we talked to Jimmy about that too. And you guys were all really, really good friends, and helped each other and just kind of leaned on each other and through tough times and good times.
Man.
So
yeah, we could go on for days about that. But he was I'd never known a truer friend, I guess, and he was a lot of good for me. And being gone now has really kind of changed my life in some ways, and all for the better. And I try to live my life in a way that maybe he looks down and smiles down on me about it. So.
Well, that's the main thing, and losing a friend, and we've lost, we lost Ryan and also Clay. There's a big hole there, I guess, and in some of the races. That we miss seeing them out there and driving and putting on a show for the fans. And
yeah, that's looking back at Ryan Peters, that might be some of what I like so much about racing. It didn't matter who you are, really what your lifestyle was. It seemed like the racing family accepts you. And Ryan was he marched to the beat of his own drum. And when I met him, I thought, oh boy, he's a little different, but he was a kid. He didn't know anything about racing, and we just kind of put our arms around him and brought him in a little bit, and that was his sanctuary. I mean, he was never happier than when he was at a racetrack. And I promise you, the night that the good Lord took him from us was probably the happiest night of his life, watching his motor running a car up front.
Yep.
And it just all depends on how you look at it, man. All of the perspectives of life and afterlife and things like that. But I was able to talk to Ryan and Clay, to both enough to know that they believed in God and Jesus Christ as their Savior. So that gives me the hope to believe that I'll see them again. And
well, that's a good friend to have. Definitely in the racing world.
I never had the opportunity to meet Clay or Ryan, so I feel there's part of my life that's a little bit dimmer for not having them in it. But listening to the stories of the people who did know them, I know that they are remembered, and they will be remembered for time immemorial because of what they were able to do on and off the track as drivers and as people. So this episode kind of served as a turning point for us in what we were actually really trying to do with this show. And we don't ever want to think about losing someone tragically, but it kind of made our efforts to capture and catalog these memories and these stories that much more important. And later in the racing season, Nathan actually got to go into the booth at Windy Hollow and do some announcing with Jake. And they talked about that on the PA system there at the track, about how important would it have been for Sue Davis to have been able to go back 2 years, after the fact, to hear her son's voice again. And that's kind of where we're at with this. We want to make sure that we're capturing these stories to make sure that we don't lose them. So thank you, Jake, for sharing that story. And when we come back, we're not going to a commercial, but when I stop talking, Jake's going to talk a little bit about what he feels is important as far as advice to up-and-coming drivers. So, Jake, Nathan, take it away.
Do you have advice that, and this could be for a racer, a promoter, announcer, any form of the sport that you want to be in, but any advice that you would give somebody starting out?
I don't know if I'm the best to give advice, but I'll give my 2 cents. It's just lighten up. Yeah. If it works, awesome. If it don't, regroup. We're all there. Everybody wants to win. When you pack in 80 cars, you're probably going to have 6 winners in the night, Yeah. So win gracefully, lose the same way. There's nothing worse than a sore loser, in my opinion. And the same way with the winner. I like the drivers that carry themselves with a little bit of class and don't get all shook up, and I don't know, just lighten up, I guess, and just enjoy the moment. I think that a lot of us take it for granted, that the track's always going to be there and there's always going to be racing and all this and that and other. But if all the catalysts that make these tracks don't work together, it could be gone tomorrow. And so I enjoy it every time that it's open, because you never know. And I think if we all had that mindset and we're just a little bit more grateful in every area of it, I'm talking about maybe me, promoters, drivers, racers, right, crews, everybody. If we all just would slow down, lighten up a little bit, and take it in, I think we would all do a little bit better.
Well, that's true, and I've been accused of it myself, as I've been a sore loser before.
Oh, well, hell, who hadn't?
Yeah, and most of the time, why you lose a race, sometimes, it can be construed as the other guy's fault at times, but a lot of the reason why you lost the race was probably because of something you did. So you got to look to yourself on some of this stuff.
Right.
And you're right. Being humble is one of the biggest things that I've tried to work on, and this is what what we're trying to accomplish here as well, is that we want to present ourselves professionally. We're not professionals, trust me, but in a more of a way to where people, when they see that we're a welcome sight, other drivers are going to be a welcome sight, that they're being like, well, I need to steer clear of that guy because he'll just go off with the drop of the hat, and that's not a good mindset. And I know it's hot during the summer times, and we all get crazy sometimes, but and driving those cars, but you're right. We need just a little more humble.
In my opinion, the gold standard driver right now is probably Josh Harris.
Yeah.
I believe that he has earned everything he's got coming his way. I believe he's done everything right. I think his family carries himself with class. Mm-hmm. I think he respects other people's equipment as well as his own. He doesn't take anything for granted, and he's just a fun guy to be around, and man, he's got all the tools. And he's been racing since '97, maybe. Kentucky Motor Speedway. But that guy has paid his dues, and to say that you can't ever come from something small to make it something big, as big as he is right now, just win this American Modified Series championship, things like that.
Right.
Man, he might be just a thumbnail away from making it big time. I don't know. There's times that I pray for people that they don't know about, but that's one of my prayers, that Josh Harris makes it big.
Yeah.
Because I think that he's got a good outlook on life, family values, and I think he deserves it. And I hope good things are coming his way.
Jake can talk about how humble Josh Harris is, and he is. And I became an immediate fan of Josh Harris when we sat down to interview him. But to listen to Jake talk about his life and the things that he's done and the decisions he's made, his advice that he just gave, just to slow down and to take it all in as you can, I think that translates to more than just being on the track. I think that's life in general. And I think that there's probably no better person out there to share that story than Jake Schown. He's an amazing guy, an amazing character. He's awesome to listen to announce, and he's just a good person to be around. Count me a fan of Jake Schown till the day that I'm dead. He's a really, really good dude, and I look forward to many more years of friendship with him. So, Josh Harris, the Kentuckian, he is coming up next, and we're going to get a little bit more of the same story from him as far as what's important and what you have to do to be a driver and to earn your dues, I guess. So, Josh, Nathan, take it away.
Before you got that first win, it was, everything was just fun. It was just, you just went out there and raced, had a good time, and then, man, I got that first win, and then you had to win every week. Then it, then it just
you get eat up with it.
Yeah, it's like everybody gets bit by the racing bug. Well, I mean it's the winning bug that gets you. You know, it's we got that first win, and it's been wide open ever since.
Well, you talk about getting that first win, and I know that while I only have one feature win, that win is so special to me. And and if I never win another one, hey, it is what it is. I'm out there competing. I'm just having a good time. And you're right. It's one of those things where I know in my career, hey, I've run in the back of the pack. I've run in the middle of the pack. You get a taste of that up front, man. And you're no stranger to victory lane now, obviously. But you get a taste of that front. I mean, it just eats at you. It's where you want to be.
It does. And it's just so much. I mean, people don't realize how much more work it is to go from a fifth-place car to a winning car. I mean, you can probably take a you can actually have this as a hobby and go out there and run 4th, 5th, 6th every week and have a lot of fun doing it. But to go from consistently being that 4th, 5th place car to that winning car, everybody tries to say that it's they don't have the money to do that, or they don't have the they don't have this, they don't have that, and that's not it. It's the work. It's the hours you put in that it doesn't take it doesn't cost any money at all to be prepared.
No.
It just takes time, and everybody's looking for 2 or 3 tenths of a second all the time, and having free ball joints is a tenth of a second, having free heims is a tenth of a second, having your tires freshly ground is a tenth of a second. That's all stuff that is absolutely free to do. Yep. It just takes time to do it, and bam, there's your 3 tenths. Right. So. And when it gets tough is when you get up in the bigger races and the higher races, and everybody's doing that stuff, yeah. and then it gets kind of tougher to find that speed. But it's something that I've done my whole life, and it's just been me and my wife both have pretty much dedicated our life to racing, and that's kind of all we know, and
yeah.
A lot of times by the end of the summer, we're like, man, this is crazy. We're wearing ourselves out, and we're spending all of our money, and we're running up and down the road, and we have no free time. And then we're off 4 months in the winter, and it's eating us up. We can't wait to get back to the track. So,
it almost seems like I did this on purpose. The whole preparedness and preparation kind of speech through this episode, and maybe I did because it is important. And when Josh and Nathan come back after this commercial break, they're going to talk about some preparation and preparedness a little bit more. So we'll be right back, and we've got more with Josh and Nathan.
Having trouble getting your business vehicle noticed? Want your race machine to look sharp on and off the track? Give Josh Taylor a call at High Octane Wraps and Apparel. They specialize in high-quality vinyl graphics as well as full vehicle vinyl wraps. They can handle jobs of all sizes, whether you're racing go-kart all the way up to your semi-truck. With quick turnaround in design and install, you can truly call today and look good tomorrow. Give them a call at 270-929-2605 or stop by their shop at 2531 West 2nd Street in Owensboro.
Well, I want to go back into something real quick. You talk about preparedness and how it doesn't cost anything, and I know you've probably it's bit you before, not having that one bolt tight or not having that one electrical connection shored up like you should. I know it's happened to me. I've lost races because of it. Not bitter about it. It just, but at the end of the day, it's my fault. So I think that there's no price you can put on that.
Absolutely.
To be ready to go,
About the only time something like that happens to us, and happened last year, when we have a complete new build, we were first night out. Last year we did build a new car. We'll probably get into this a little bit later, but I switched teams in 2017. So new car, new engine, new everything. And we were at Florence first night out, and we had a fuel pump bolt come loose. And had it not been for that, we were in contention to win a race. So. Right. But throughout the week, it's so critical to just go over the car and look at everything. And I see people show up at the track with a dirty car, and a lot of people look at our stuff and wonder why we spend so much time cleaning and wiping. And the reason for that is when you're under there and you're wiping off every bar with a towel or a rag or whatever, if something's wrong, you'll see it. It's not just because we're neat freaks, which we are a little bit. We're a little obsessive about that, but the main reason for that is if you physically have your hand on every bar or part on that car, and if there's something wrong, more than likely you're going to see it.
Listening to Josh talk about being a better driver and learning what you need to do with your race program was an incredible time, and Nathan and Josh clicked. They really didn't know each other before this interview, so watching them interact was fantastic to watch too. So here's some more advice from Josh about being the best possible driver that you can be.
You got to have your nose to the grindstone, but your head in the clouds a little bit, and you got to be watching for those opportunities because you never know when one will present itself. Yeah,
and another thing, there are so many people out here that will try to discourage you. You got to go to the racetrack for yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't be at the racetrack for any other reason than it's for yourself, because it's sad to say, but we live in a society that craves on other people's failure. People's hobby is pointing out people's faults, and you got to block all that stuff out, because the more you get out, the more you're in the public spotlight, the more people know you, the more critics that show up. Mm-hmm. So you got to learn how to just block them people out, just not pay attention to it. You got to know what you want to do and that you're doing it right. And you gotta really get a thick skin and really learn to ignore a lot of people.
Right.
And like I said, as many critics that show up, the right people show up too. So yeah. It's a tough deal. You gotta learn how to block people out.
And then X person will show up, and you're like, oh God, man, I wish that guy hadn't showed up. But you know what though? Here's the thing: what that person has accomplished, or what they haven't, or what have you. You're right. You can't let it psych you out, because here's the thing: maybe he is on a different level than you are, but that's the level you want to be at. And there's no way, there's no better way than racing the best to get better, And I think that's pretty cool how you talk about the game that, you know, and a lot of people don't understand, the game of racing. And, you know, when you're in that seat, you're paying attention to that guy in front of you. And you're looking at where, okay, he's loose on this corner, he's tight off that corner, and I know he likes to go to the high side late in the race and stuff. So you already know this, but of course, then the other side of that is they know your characteristics too, and I think that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, it's you know, you got to know your competition, but you got to know your stuff. You know, you got to know your cars. That's the most important thing, is knowing where your car runs, you know. So it's a lot of stuff you can use to your advantage, and it's nothing that the only way to get it is race those guys, you know. Yeah. Seat time, the more time you can be in a car with that great competition around you, then the better you're going to be, you know.
Well, it is, you know, this class, the UMP modified class and different series of the same cars is stone cold. I mean, these guys are tough, and they're tough at any racetrack. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a Cedar Ridge Speedway, Windy Hollow Speedway, all the way up to Bloomington, Eldora, you know, Peevely, Missouri, just different places. I mean, these guys are tough, and you know that firsthand.
Everywhere in the country you go with this type of car, and that's another thing I like about this, is we can race just about anywhere and not have to change a lot of stuff. So that's another thing I like about this class. But just about anywhere you go, you have those guys that you know you have to beat. You know, you go to you go around here, like it's not any easier to win at Cedar Ridge than it is at any of these big races. Yeah. The only difference is where if you're a little bit off at Cedar Ridge on a local, and I say Cedar Ridge because that's where I'm at on a local night. I'm not at these other tracks on local nights, so it's the same for those tracks on a local night, you know. So, like if you're at a track where, say it's a local night and there's only 20 cars there, and you're a little bit off, then there's 4, 5, 6 guys that can beat you. Right. Where when you go to these big races where there's 80 or 90 cars and you're a little bit off, well, now instead of having to worry about 4 or 5 guys beating you, you have to worry about even being able to get into the A main. We went to Farmer City last year, 40 or 50 cars. The top 10 cars, the top 12 cars were within 1/10 of a second qualifying. So when everybody's that much on their game, it's not any harder to win. There's just so many more people that can win. Yeah. So, like, if you're at a local track and you mess up, you worry about 1 or 2 cars getting around you. If you're there and you mess up, you worry about going from 5th to freaking 15th, and it'll happen in a lap. I mean, that's how competitive it is when you get to these bigger races, when you have 50, 60 cars. So it's pretty amazing that, you know, a dirt circle track, you know, 4 turns, 2 straightaways, and there's 12 cars that making that exact same circle within 1/10 of a second. That is unreal.
Not gonna lie, I was pretty starstruck when we sat down to do that interview with Josh, because before we met him, and this was my first time meeting him, he was probably the most famous racer in this area. Everybody talked about Josh Harris, and his reputation preceded him. But what people didn't bother to let you know was how humble and welcoming and open he and his wife were. They opened their home to us, and we sat and took, you know, a part of their Saturday, and it was just a great time to get to meet him and hear his stories. And I consider myself very lucky to, you know, be able to call him a friend now. He will answer my dumb racing questions, you know, that I have, and he takes his time and, you know, doesn't treat me like I'm, you know, any different than anybody else. So I am a fan of the 22 race machine whenever I get to see him race. So you know, he's a pretty cool guy, and I'm grateful. So coming up next, we've got Nathan and John Hayden with Mach 5 Race Cars Parts and Carts, one of our sponsors. But they spend quite a bit of time talking about John's storied career in racing. And coming up when I stop talking will be John and Nathan talking about some advice for up-and-coming drivers. And it's just pulling on the years and years of experience that John has. So John and Nathan doing the advice thing.
One thing I want to move in, and we got to talking about this a little bit ago. Advice. From a guy who's been in the sport for better than 25 years and still going strong in the sport, just in a different capacity. We got guys starting out every day that race, and guys that start every year. Oh, I want a race car. And thinking back on your years, what would you say to these young guys, these young drivers, to help them not only start in the sport but to stay in the sport for the long haul?
I would just to look back, and kind of what I've gone through. If I had somebody, that come in here, and I get guys that come in and ask me what I think, and I'll tell them, that for one, it takes a lot of dedication in this sport.
Yeah.
If you're not dedicated to it, because for one, it takes a lot of money to race.
It absolutely does.
It takes a lot of time. Like I said before, it takes time from your family. But, if you're not dedicated to it and put into your race car what it needs to be, if you're going to race, if you kind of go, if you don't give it 100%, and you still got to put the money in it, if you're not giving that 100% towards it, it just seems like to me that, you're kind of spending money for no reason, and, so I just, I tell a lot of guys that, when they're getting in it, that either, you really need to decide if you're going to be dedicated or not to it, and do it right. Because if you don't, the way I look at it, you're wasting time and money, the time is you're taking time away from your family, So if you're going to, if you're going to get into it, you've got to give 100% to it, because if all you do is go out there and you're tearing up stuff and you're wrecking, and because your car's not prepared, it's just like you wasted your money.
Mm-hmm.
You took time away from your family. If you're gonna, not that you got to win, but if you just got to be, there's a lot. I see a lot of guys that's. They're not dedicated to the sport, and it takes away. It takes away from not only the what you gotta, the time you got to spend working on it, but it takes away from all your family and the money that you put into it. But just somebody young that's coming into it, the biggest thing is, to me, I just really tell them that that dedication is what you gotta to be successful in it.
Yeah.
In the sport, you got to be really dedicated and give 100% to it.
Well, there's two things that I'm taking out of this is, number one, we're talking about time and how it takes away from your time, and money is important, and it's a money game.
Right.
Racing is a money game, and we all know that. But your time is valuable and it's worth something,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're not able to, or you're not dedicated enough to, get out in that garage, take that set of wrenches, and start turning those bolts, make sure everything's tight, all the connections and stuff like that. You're right. You're wasting your money. You're wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's stuff you're never going to get back.
Right.
And especially if you crash because you didn't have something tight, or you didn't have the spark plug wire fell off for some reason because you didn't check it,
Right.
I mean, it's big things,
Yeah.
And we're not saying you have to win.
Right.
You want to win. That's the whole point of being in racing.
Right.
But, you definitely want to do well, and you want to represent yourself well.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, that's a big deal. But, I think that young drivers, I think one thing is, and I wanted to touch on this too, was you talked about having the right people around you
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
Right.
And is that something to where it helps you succeed from the standpoint of, if you're just a high school kid and you're getting into it, okay, with a mini stock or a bomber or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the right people around you, are you more susceptible to just, that's good enough?
Right.
But if you surround yourself with guys who are like, no, man, that's not good enough. Why don't we do this or do that?
Yeah.
Do you think that's more conducive? That'll keep guys in the sport a little longer?
Right. Yeah. because if you get into it and you don't have the people showing you how to do things, and there's probably a good chance you're going to get aggravated, and if you don't go out and you don't do good, if you're always having problems with the car because you don't have somebody showing you the right or wrong, they might just eventually just give up and say, I don't know, I don't have nobody showing me, I'm spending my money on it and I'm not really getting anything out of it, and I really think that, and that's real big with young kids right off the bat, that they need to surround themselves with people that's already been in the sport. It just makes it easier on them.
I realized the interview segment that I selected from John's episode was short-ish and focused mostly on advice. But when you have a storied, prolific career like he does, it's hard to pick one thing out of his whole episode that I wanted to focus on. So I just kind of kept with a theme about advice and preparedness and those things. And I want you to pause this episode right now if you've not listened to his, and I want you to go listen to John Hayden's episode, because it's an important episode and there is so much information in it that I didn't feel like I could do him justice by pulling just one story. So go listen to his episode. I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding. But I really would wait. You should hear it. And if you've listened to it already, go listen to it again, because it's a great episode. And on the other side of this is going to be the driver of the number 66 cruiser car, Cole Falloway. And we got to sit down with Cole, and I feel kind of bad because the majority of his episode primarily focused on go-karts. And I don't want to shortchange his time as a stock car driver, because he has done phenomenally well in both circuits. But he was our first go-kart driver, so it ended up being a primer on what it meant to be a go-kart driver and the differences between go-karts and stock cars. So he did an amazing job filling us in and teaching us those things. So got a couple clips from his episode talking again about advice, talking about being a go-kart driver, and just the differences. The fact that the purses that they run for on these go-kart tracks are so much bigger than they are in stock cars. So here is Cole Trickle Falloway, driver of the number 66 machine, and we're going to listen to him for a minute, and we'll be back in just a second.
Well, you hit on it a few minutes ago on the $50,000 race. Tell us about that, how that works, and how that, man, I mean, you just think of $50,000 for a go-kart race.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't know what to do for a $50,000 stock car race. I mean, people be coming out of the woodwork. But tell us about that. I mean, how that comes about, and how that big money that they can pay that stuff.
Yeah, the last one they had was at Sikeston, Missouri, and you obviously had all your big guys from down south all come up, and everybody from the Midwest, and all of us from here. Everybody was there. I think they had 70 or 80 go-karts that registered for the $50,000 to win. Then they had like a $20,000 to win Junior 3 race, and that's what I ran. I wasn't running adults at the time. And I've led a 10,000 win race and came close to winning it and ended up getting wrecked. And then the 20,000, I was actually really fast about lap 30. It was a 50-lap race. I was really fast about lap 30 in it and ended up getting caught up in a wreck in it too. We just never had any even decent luck at the big races like that.
Well, is it, talk about those races and how, we always listen to Richard Petty when he would always say, you can spend the entire race putting yourself in a position to win and
yeah.
Things will dictate the outcome out of your control. And guys get pretty bloodthirsty for especially for 20,000 to win, but is it more of a cutthroat thing, or is there more of a gentleman's agreement? Because you can't really bang fenders. You know?
I mean, the first 10,000 they had, I started 29th in it and got up to 6th and just ran out of time. And then the 20,000, I started 23rd in it and was in 2nd at one point and then fell back and then got caught up in a wreck. I mean, it's just kind of work your way up through there and try not to get caught up in everybody else's crap where they're trying to win it towards the beginning of the race. Sometimes it's out of your hands, though, where you can't control it.
Well, guys are notorious, and I've seen it 100 times, man. And you have to, just in your short time in the big car stuff, people trying to win it on the first lap, man. You cannot. It's a proven fact. You cannot win that race on the first lap. No matter what you do. How are those big races like that? Normal day at those. How do they break them down? I mean, if you've got 80 carts, especially in your class or whatever, how do they determine who's going to start the big race?
They normally do a first round qualifying. They'll do a first round for every class and take, maybe 10, 15 out of it. And then anybody that didn't make it, they'll do a second round for them and take 10, 15 more out of that, and that'll line up your field for the A-main.
So you're looking at about 30 carts.
Yeah.
You can only get in it. Well, and you think of some of these tracks, 30 carts is a ton. As small as they are, but they do take up space, and that's a lot of racing.
50,000 to win. Could you imagine the caliber of the drivers themselves and the competitive spirit would be crazy. Not to mention the sheer number of drivers that would come out to a stock car race for that. I think you would have people pulling cars from under their houses and throwing them on the track to win or have an opportunity to win that 50,000. You would probably have like an A through D main at least for that. So just the fact that Cole has been able to compete in races, that are big like that is pretty cool, especially as somebody that is at a starting point in their career like he is. So have to applaud him for, just the cool nature that he has where he can just go out there and drive and be level-headed and not, just lose it, in these huge races and stuff. So I think that's pretty cool. So I'll give you two guesses what we're going to talk about next. And the first one doesn't count. And the second one should be preparedness. So here's Cole and Nathan talking about being prepared.
Preparation via, everything that you can do. Because, when we got here, you're working on your car. Going to try to race this weekend. And do you find that it's better? It's obviously better to be prepared. But, you personally, is that very, very important?
Yeah, like go-karts especially, you kind of got to, you start a lot earlier, so you kind of got to have everything ready that day, kind of ready to go. Obviously putting fuel and oil in them and stuff like that, but race cars, you pretty much have all that done whenever you get there. You really don't have to do a whole lot whenever you get to the racetrack with a race car until you get done with practice and qualifying and stuff like that.
So now, do you change things? How do you deal with track conditions? I guess do you have to adjust like we do on the race cars in between your practice sessions, your qualifying? Do you have like a practice trim and then a qualifying trim like we see in NASCAR?
Yeah, we really don't have anything like that. Like we'll move weight or move cross or change caster camber. Like that's real easy to change in go-karts because you just have your washers. You just kind of move them around however you got to change cross. And, stuff like that. We'll move weight to change the way the go-kart's handling. That's pretty much mostly all we do in go-karts.
Surrounding yourself with good people, making sure that you have people on your team that want to help you achieve your vision and help you get to where you need to be is so important. And Cole talks to us about that now with his team, specifically Josh Evans. And then he's going to give us a little bit of advice again for the up-and-coming drivers, the young guys out there like him who are just starting. So 2 clips back-to-back. Good people on your team and good advice for young drivers. So here's Nathan and Cole.
You being such a young driver, and it's crazy to think that you've got so much experience and being as young as you are. Think about some of those kids that you see at the track, and some of the kids that are in the stands, even at the stock car side. But based on your life experience and your racing career so far, what advice do you have for those kids?
Take whatever opportunity you can get and get in racing. Go racing as often as you can. Try to look up to guys that you know can help you and try to get with them and get them to help you out with things that you're struggling with.
Well, and John Hayden said the same thing. Is it's all about who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I know you've got a ton of people that go with you, and especially Josh Evans being a mentor, I guess, and a fellow racer himself. Have you learned most of your stuff from him?
Yeah, in go-karts, he's pretty much taught me everything I know in go-karts because he's helped me since I was 4, and he's always been there with me, teaching me stuff.
What do you see as the state of racing? Do you see it as thriving? Do you see it as struggling? What's your take on it?
Obviously, like whenever you go to them big races and you see a lot of kids in the beginner classes, then it makes you feel like, then there's a lot more kids coming up through the sport. And whenever you see a lot of kids in like junior classes, but some of these local races you go to and there ain't but 2 or 3 in all the junior classes, then it kind of makes you think, well, it's kind of dying. But I don't think it isn't going down anytime soon. But just getting more kids into it and bringing them up through here like I did is probably the biggest thing.
You think about that and getting these kids in here and your big races, do you think it's a money thing, or do you think that are we not, and you say locally, there'd be 2 or 3 guys or 5 guys. What's the disconnect there? What's the difference? Do you see a difference? Can you think of anything?
I don't think there's a whole lot of a difference. Just money has a little bit to do with it, but once your adult classes too, once you start putting up a lot of the money, then you start running some of your local guys off because they think they don't have a chance to come there and race against the guys that are coming in for the big money. But I don't see a big difference. Like, just sometimes in your area there isn't as many kids coming up through it as there is in some of the other areas.
As you heard, we interrupted Cole's day and pulled him away from working on his car. And when we recorded his episode, school was still in, so he had been in school that day and came home to, do his homework and work on his race car. And then we show up and just throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. But we are thankful and grateful for him for taking the time out of his busy day to talk with us. And we've talked to him since, and we've seen him at different racetracks and talked to him at Windy Hollow. And his career is on a fast track to doing great things, and we can't wait to see what's next for him. So if you're at a track where he's at, you're guaranteed a pretty good show. He's a heck of a driver and just an all around cool dude. So thank you, Cole. Coming up right after our next commercial break, we have one of the most well-known voices in this area, and that's the voice of Billy Igler. So come back and listen to some advice, some stories, and those things from Billy. We'll be right back.
For most of us, our lives revolve around our computers. From banking and paying your bills to organizing and storing your photos. You need your computer to just work. If computer problems are driving you crazy, call Fairview IT Management at 270-228-4339, and they can get you back on track with one phone call. You can also find Fairview IT Management online at www.fairviewitm.com.
It's something that's been close to my heart as well. It's just nothing like motorsports, and to be able to, and I'll talk about it from a guy who just is kind of a hobby guy and things like that. And I would love to do stuff like that, but then everything's got to fall into place a lot of times. And even back then, and especially now, I would say it's a little harder. But back then, everything had to fall into place for you to be able to do what you're doing.
It really did. And one thing that I hear so often. Still to this day is how expensive the sport is, and it's it's a very expensive sport, regardless of what you're doing. Even down to the soapbox derby cars. You know, those things are costing close to $400 for these kids to be able to run down the hill over here at Ben Hall's.
Right. And just
go-kart racing, you know, with you having to spend the money on the tires and the engines and the chassis and everything. It's just so expensive, and that's always been the case. But it seems like what's happening now versus years gone by is electronic devices. You know, I mean, we've got kids that have no interest at all and have never seen a motorsports event because they're too busy sitting in their damn bedroom playing on Nintendos or playing on their phones, you know. And we've got to get that changed.
And that's and you are correct. You know, you see a lot of these kids, and they, you know, I talked to my son, and who's now just about to be 19 here in August, and you know, he was talking about. I would say, hey man, why don't you go to the mall and why don't you go to the movies and this and that? And he goes, is that what you think kids do today? Like, I was like, of course, I guess I'm older than dirt now. I didn't know it was, but you know, and kids just don't get out and experience it because, you know, you just think about Windy Hall Speedway or, you know, Kentucky Motor Speedway, Cedar Ridge, whatever. You're not going to find the guys and the ladies that you find at these racetracks that can tell the stories, can do the funny stuff that they do, like that they can, you know? And that's the way I feel about it. I mean, guys like you know what I mean? It's guys that are so full of knowledge can impart this stuff on today's kids. And I think they're missing a big opportunity.
They really are. And, you know, we're lucky enough in this United States to have two great colleges that stick out in my mind, you know, more than any of them, that are motorsports based. You've got the NASCAR Technical Institute over in Charlotte, and you've got UNOH up in Ohio, University of Northwest Ohio, that has a whole motorsports class, I guess you could say.
Yeah, just geared toward that.
That's all you do. You work on race cars, you build engines. You have the opportunity to go to the racetrack and crew on the university's race cars. You have the opportunity to be a driver for the university. And we've got people around here that have attended those colleges and graduated and have moved on into the motorsports industry that have the opportunity to continue to grow, but we've got to get kids that are wanting to do that.
Yeah, and you know, but I guess it's almost few and far between these days because I don't know if it's a cost thing or just people just aren't interested in being like, hey, it could be a career, because it's a big niche, you know, still yet in motorsports. I mean, lots of national series.
If you hear something from one person, then maybe it's just way out there in left field or whatever. But if you continue to hear the same thing over and over again from multiple sources, then there's probably some truth in it. So whether that's getting out and helping your fellow drivers and your fellow fans, or being prepared and being alert and oriented, when you get the same advice, probably should, you know, take it to heart and do something with it. So 2 clips back to back again with Billy, with some advice on, you know, what we can do to help the sport and to help ourselves.
Yeah, it's great to be able to help somebody along the way, and that's something that announcers need to do. It's something that track promoters need to do. It's something that racers need to do, and it's something that crew members need to do. You need to start helping bring people into the sport and get them into the next level and help them progress. And as a race fan, you know, I mean, I preach it on social media all the time. Go to your neighbor and ask them if they've ever been to a race, and if they haven't, take them. Just spend $10 and take them to a damn race.
Yeah. I mean, it's affordable. It's cheaper than a movie.
I guarantee it is. You know, it's cheaper than anything, and I can guarantee you one thing: if you want to keep your children off of drugs, get them into racing. It's just as addictive and just as expensive.
Exactly.
So get them into
they
racing.
will not have any money for any drugs.
That's exactly
I will
right.
swear to you.
Whether it's getting fans in the seats or getting kids into racing, we have to do something to make sure that this sport sticks around, and Billy's got a point. So here he is talking about being prepared, alert, and focused.
No, really, I didn't. You know, making sure you're awake and ready to go. You know, you got to be focused and committed. You know, I can't say that enough. We've mentioned it a bunch in this podcast, but focus is probably the main thing.
Right.
You've got to be focused on what you're going to do, and that even goes back to when like you said, when I was crewing, I had the opportunity to change tires for Tim Banks during the 24 Hours of Daytona. When you jump off the wall and run around the car, and you're on the right side on your knees changing tires, and you've got cars flying by at 230 miles an hour on pit road back before there were any type of pit road speeds, you've got to be focused on what you're doing and know your surroundings. Same deal at Daytona with Dean. Go over the wall to fuel or change tires or whatever it may be. You've got to know your surroundings, and that's something you really got. I can't stress enough. You've got to be focused, regardless if you're at Kentucky Motor Speedway, Cedar Ridge Speedway, Windy Hollow Speedway, at Beacon Dragway. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You've got to stay focused.
And that's a lot of what we hear about the drivers and things. They're talking about preparation in the shop. You've got to be prepared, but you've got to focus on, okay, this is what I want to accomplish today. This is what I want to get to, and I'm going to do it. And is that something that you just get that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There again, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the sport. You've got to have your mindset.
Being present, being in the moment, knowing what you're doing, having your mindset and focused. Truer words couldn't be spoken, and we're glad that we got to hear them from Billy. Our last clip coming up, and we're going to roll into that, and then we'll take our final commercial break and close this episode out, is Billy echoing something that we talk about strongly and often, and that's making sure that sponsors are taken care of and that you do everything you can to make sure that you're representing your racing program and those people that believe in you the best way you can. So here's Billy closing out our best of show talking about sponsorships.
As an announcer, regardless of the form of motorsports, the most important thing that you can do is mention the race car's sponsors.
Exactly.
There are so many people that are announcing anymore that'll rattle off a name, a hometown, a car number, and never mention a sponsor. Well, that's part of the reason why it's so hard for a racer to go get a sponsor anymore, is because they don't get mentioned at the racetrack in front of 1,000 people.
Right.
If you aren't mentioning the sponsors, then you're not doing our sport any justice at all.
Well, because if you're not, and a lot of times, most of the fans aren't allowed in the pits unless you get a pit pass, so that you can't transition back and forth and go look at the race cars. But when they're flying by you at 60, 70 miles an hour down the front straightaway, can you read that? Can you read the sticker? You know what I mean? But that guy up in the booth was able to tell you that he was sponsored by this person, that person, this business, that business, and that's important to him.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why the Bluegrass Bash 3 that took place at Western Kentucky Speedway back in 2006 had the sponsorship of the United States Army and Red Bull energy drink, is because they knew that I was going to take care of them as sponsors, and they would be mentioned regardless of how many times it was during the night, and they would be on all the printed advertising and everything.
Right.
You've got to have a little bit of credibility to present to these sponsors that you can actually say, hey, I'm going to be on a radio show or I'm going to be on a podcast, and your name's going to be mentioned to 50,000 people over the radio, and that is free advertising for you.
Absolutely.
Or I'm going to have my car on display at your location on May 7th from 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, where people that are driving by can see it, or people can stop and see it, and kids can sit in it or whatever. You've got to be able to help the sponsor to be able to keep them in the sport, and the sponsors are what keep our sport alive.
Right. And that's the main thing is, and it just like, we'll throw it back to the very second episode we did. Blake Smith, he's like, you've got to take care of the people who take care of you. And that is very important, especially on any form of motorsports or even ball teams,
Absolutely.
And local, high school sports and little league and what have you. You got sponsors.
Absolutely right. I mean, do you think Budweiser would have Busch Stadium in St. Louis for the Cardinals and spend the money they do on advertisement at that ball field and on TV and sell their product at that stadium if they weren't getting their money back out of it?
No, it is absolutely.
It's no different for Major League Baseball, for NASCAR, for Windy Hollow Speedway, Kentucky Motor Speedway, Cedar Ridge Speedway, or any other track across the nation.
Well, to me, and this is maybe a school of thought, and I don't know if you'll agree or not, but to me, I think even local stuff and local sponsors are more important, just because if that guy, okay, Budweiser can spend $10 million on a huge sign to go up on Busch Stadium. Joe's repair shop down the street can afford to give me $100. Okay, that's going to help me out. Joe's going to get his sticker. Joe's just as important as Budweiser, to me.
Absolutely, and that's the way it should be for every racer. It doesn't matter if it's a go-kart or if it's a soapbox derby car or what it is. If you're giving someone money, they need to be promoting your business.
Exactly.
It's no different than, if I was to give you $50 and say, hey, I want Billy's Badass Barbecue on your race car, what am I going to get out of it? Right. Okay, I'm going to get a sticker on your race car. But as a driver or a team owner, you need to make yourself go to these radio shows, do these podcasts, put your car in front of people, whether it's sitting out in front of a gas station,
right,
for an hour putting gas in it. Pumps real slow. Sorry, guys.
It is very slow.
But, you've got to be able to promote that business,
right,
because that business is spending advertising money with you, and they could take that $100, $50, $300, $1,000 or whatever, and spend it on radio advertising, on TV advertising, on the newspaper, the Thrifty Nickel, whatever it may be, and get as much or more exposure than what they are from a decal on a race car.
Right. But and I see that, but if we're not doing what we need to do, and this is new to me, and racing's not new to me, but I've always had stickers, and we've had the mindset to where we've switched it, and while this is to promote other people and to benefit other people, yes, it is to be, it's for our assistance as well.
Sure.
But this is the good thing about it, is that we can get on here and say people's names, we can talk about their business, we can have commercials, we can have different stuff, and we can have stickers on the race car, and we can go to the radio show. And so it's a lot of outlets where we got, social media, whereas it's both a curse, but then sometimes it's a blessing.
Absolutely. And so many times we see where it is used as a curse. And, social media avenue could be so huge, not only for racers, but racetracks and businesses. But then you've got these keyboard jockeys and want to be, for lack of better terms, Billy Badasses, and never show their face and never support anything that has to do with anything. And that's really hurting, I feel, and there's people that will disagree that it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
But I think 9 times out of 10 it is hurting.
Are you looking for a hometown barbershop specializing in the best haircuts in Western Kentucky? Master Barber Chad Thompson has everything you need to keep you looking sharp for not only your special occasions, but for every day as well. Offering a line of haircut products to take care of your hair between cuts. Walk-ins are welcome, and you're always going to find friends and neighbors at Chad's. You can find Chad at 10655 Highway 764 in Whitesville, Kentucky, or you can give him a call at 270-903-8183.
I made it to the end. No, that was fantastic. It was a great time. It was a short trip down memory lane for me, and getting to listen to those interviews again was like visiting with friends you haven't seen in a while. So whether it was Billy Eagler talking about sponsorships or all the advice that was given, we are grateful and thankful for every single person who has sat down at a mic for us and told their story and put up with our shenanigans and us stealing their, most of their Saturdays. So we couldn't do it without those guys. We can't do it without you guys, the fans and the listeners. We want to bring you quality content every week. And in order to do that, we need to hear from you. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. Let us know what you want out of our show. And we will do the very dead level best to accommodate those things. We're growing and we're learning every single week, and we just want to bring the best show that we can to you guys. So let us know. We do hear from people from time to time So this week, heard from Mike Harris, who, if you're listening to this while you're on your way to that demolition derby in Vanderburgh County, I believe it was, hope you give them hell. Bring home a Mad Dog Award. We hope you do fantastic over there. And, whether it's demo or rallycross, motocross, autocross, circle track, drag racing, if it's got wheels and a motor, we want to support it. We want to celebrate it. And we want to bring that content to you guys. So keep listening. I hope that you guys weren't too bored listening to this best of episode. I know not having Nathan here with me is kind of a letdown because, he's kind of the voice and the talent, and I'm the button masher kind of guy. But vacations are important. They help keep our sanity. They help keep our families together. And while he's off enjoying some beignets and voodoo ghost tours and Bloody Marys and all that stuff, I'm here making sure that you don't miss a week. And we're going to continue to do things like this so that way you have 52 weeks of the year full of fantastic motorsports content. So you can find us wherever podcasts are found. Obviously, you found us already, or you're listening in someone else's car or their Bluetooth. So if you need to download us, it's iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of the places you can get podcasts. We have web presences all over the place, whether it's our website, www.thebentfenderpodcast or conwayracingteam.com, or the Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. Get in touch with us. Let us know what you want to hear, and we will absolutely do our best to get it out there for you. We can't do this without the help of our sponsors, and those are Mach 5 Race Cars and Parts, Glenstone Construction, Chad's Barbershop, Red Star Graphics, Fairview IT Management, Slingshot Media Group, Martin's Towing and Recovery, High Octane Wraps and Apparel, Willie's Carbon Dyno Shop, and Lori Kimball, Home Realty Incorporated. Still have plenty of room for more sponsors. Get out there, and sponsor some podcasts or some race cars. So, for Nathan Porkchop Conway, I am Wes, insert nickname here, Llewellyn, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the best up-and-coming motorsports podcast on the internet. Tune in next week to see who we're trading paint with on the Bent Fender Podcast.